Robinson Show, we're back with War Baby. War
Hey
Baby.
guys, what's up?
What's going on,
doing
War
our
Baby?
show. How are you, War Baby?
I'm doing well, thank you. How about you guys? What's the weather like?
It's about 60-something. It's all right. It's
Better.
nice.
Yeah, better than it
Nice.
was.
It was
Yeah.
too warm the other day, though. It was like 84. It was
I liked it.
gross. That was disgusting.
You liked it, Slambo?
I liked it.
Ugh.
Ugh. How was it out there? But you guys are dry, right, in Arizona?
Yes, it's super windy today, so I'm expecting just everything around me to catch on fire. So night's over, so we'll see. So
Wind
windy.
fire.
It gets really cold at night there, right?
No, not really. Not in the Phoenix area because we are in a valley, so the heat just kind of radiates all around us 24/7.
Ooh. Is that why?
It makes everyone have a really good attitude.
Oh, okay. How's your show been, War Baby?
Pretty much invented road rage.
Don't go there. Go there. Or don't go there.
It's just hot. I mean, sometimes when you're hot, you're just pissed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. What about vehicular homicide?
I think we have our fair share. You know,
Okay.
what's been going around here a lot is people driving on the wrong side of the freeway.
Really?
Really? Why?
Like
Why?
a trend that's
Yeah.
trending?
Because they're hot?
They want to do it? They want to show off?
I think they drank so many margaritas because they were hot. But I really don't know. But we
That's
have
how
a
they
lot
ended
of
up there.
wrong-way driving here, so
Wow.
it's pretty scary. I
That is fucked
I
up.
have multiple kids who drive. It's scary.
Yeah. My kids are still young.
Today's my son's 18th birthday.
Wow.
So I don't know
Congrats.
how, but I managed to get another one to adulthood. So we'll see what happens when the third one gets to adulthood.
There's another one
And then
waiting.
what the fuck do I do with my life?
Then they support you. Then they drive you on the wrong side of the road.
Man, I honestly hope they have something better to do.
God damn. How's your show been, War Baby? You told me about 2 new series. Is that on your show, or are you doing other shows?
No, I was talking about the 2 series I'm working on for Murderous Minors.
Cool.
It's going well. I've made a couple appearances here and there. I was just on the Pros and Cons podcast, which is a really cool true crime podcast. They 2/3 of them used to have another really popular podcast, and then they broke off. But they're true crime TV producers.
Wow.
So if you watch true crime TV, they've definitely touched most of everything that you've watched. So it's really fun to be on their show. We use the script from the show on A&E called Killer Kids, because one of the gals, Bethany, she was a producer on that show. So we pull episodes right from there, and then we do them together. So I just did that, and we did an episode that dropped today on their feed, the Pros and Cons, about 2 teenagers who murdered one of their classmates, but they did it with scream masks on, those ghost masks. And they
Ghostface.
chronicled it like on video.
Oof.
What? Huh. Wow.
Yeah.
They were trying
Yeah, a
to
couple
remember
years
the
ago.
90s.
Yeah, they were doing a little scream.
Was it like a friend of theirs, or was it just somebody they just...
Of course. You don't do that to a non-friend.
Well, it kind of seems like one of them had a crush on this girl. But it was a
like
really,
when you
and this
punch the
was
girl you
back
like.
when Scream was popular.
What's that?
This was back when Scream was popular.
Oh, I thought you meant like now they did it. That's why I said they were trying to remember the 90s. They were like, we're going to bring back Scream.
The Ghostface
No,
was...
they were taking that shit real serious.
Wow. God damn. That's like Slenderman.
Yeah, so we covered that, and freaking heartbreaking. The girl was just gorgeous, and it's just that whole, no offense to men or anything, but, sometimes boys feel like if they can't have it, no one can kind of situation.
Fucked up. Yeah.
And it's really sad to be the girl and, on the other end of that.
Yeah. Wow. What was the
But
one
on
you
my
just did?
show-
Oh, what's that?
What's that?
I was gonna ask the one you just did. It's Young Serial Killers Part 1.
Yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. Part 1 was pretty good. I tried to cover, I was doing around the world, so we're going a little international. So I covered like the youngest known serial killer from India, and
Yeah.
he was 8
Of
years old when
course.
he killed 3 babies.
Did you reference him in another show? Because I felt like you had. I felt like I heard you talk about that guy before. He was like,
I don't know. I might have because people do ask about him sometimes.
He was an 8-year-old, you
Yeah.
said?
What
Yeah.
became of him? Like,
Yeah, an 8-year-old. Well, I mean, this was in India, but it was in 2007, so it wasn't that long ago. But I mean, they really couldn't do that much because he was so young, and in a lot of countries, 8-year-olds can't even be, charged with a crime. Like,
Yeah.
you have to be of a minimum age in some countries to even be charged with a crime. So I'm pretty sure that the maximum he could get was 3 years in a juvenile facility. And then somebody else wrote about him, and they followed up their blog post saying that he had contacted them and that he was staying in like a group home until he was 18. So he's past 18 now. So as far as everyone knows, he's been released back into society, completely rehabilitated, I'm sure.
yeah, of course. Who was the kid from Argentina, though? The one who, like, masturbated in front of his parents and just, like... Was he the one that would, like, almost be kissed to death, but then act like he saved them? Like...
Yes, absolutely. Isn't that crazy?
He was
Just
crazy.
devious.
Yes.
It's crazy to think a 15-year-old could act like that, but he was really peculiar
problem.
looking, and they kind of thought that maybe he had fetal alcohol syndrome, but he had like really big ears, and his arms and legs were really long. He was like disproportionate limbs, so he was kind of weird looking. So after a while, after seeing him, around the scene where all of these kids were, some kids were brought back from the brink of death, then suspicions started to arise. But yeah, when your own parents turn you in on multiple occasions, you know if your own alcoholic wife and dad can't handle you.
You said
then,
they were alcoholics and
you
had
got
syphilis,
problems,
right? Where they have syphilis?
oh man,
Yeah.
some
course
people
he
should be
did.
sterilized.
What good father doesn't have syphilis?
Doesn't
man.
syphilis sterilize you, though? Like, I thought so.
When it gets like bad enough, it definitely does.
Like King Henry syphilis.
yeah, it's like super Lyme
Yeah,
disease.
and
It's
Hitler.
And Hitler?
Pretty sure Hitler had syphilis too.
What do you
So I'm
say,
going to
Doc?
cover two really, really psychotic guys for the United States. So I'll do that next week. And so, yeah, we have two pretty young serial killers from our own country. So,
Wow.
So I'm
but
curious.
the series, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask more about this 8-year-old. Do you think that like somebody at that age who committed that
Could they be
horrific crime,
rehabilitated?
could they be rehabilitated, or do you think like that's just you for the rest of your life?
Well, I mean, it kind of depends on, well, probably not. I mean, he could probably be put back in society if he did have proper rehabilitation, but where's that going to come from?
They should smother him.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's
Like-
more so.
we don't even have that here. So do we really think they have that in his village in India?
Yeah.
Good point.
They
So
have street dentists.
it's
in India.
yeah, street dentist. So it's more like you think the rehabilitation is the issue that they're lacking. Like we don't really have that ability right now to rehabilitate people.
Who does have that ability? Shock? Should they
I
bring
don't
back
know,
shock
but
therapy?
maybe if we tried. I'm not really sure how much we really try to rehabilitate people, but I mean, there are people who have mental issues and take medication and have their treatment, whatever that is,
Yeah.
and can live in society without killing people.
Yeah.
Most mentally ill people do. Hardly, and most crimes are not committed by somebody who's just mentally ill, but. And I don't know if he had any mental diagnosis of any sort. So it sounds like he was in juvenile detention and then in a group home. So
Right.
doesn't really. I'm not sure if anyone addressed any of those issues.
Almost
But
just
you
pushed.
also-
he was just pushed through the system.
You also
pretty
don't
much.
know if he was like brutally abused himself, like as a child. So like
Syphilis.
somebody could have.
Somebody
Syphilis.
Wasn't really what we were talking
just
about.
don't have a
No,
syphilis,
no, I'm
baby.
just saying somebody could have syphilized
Yeah,
him.
that's
We don't know.
Who was the other one though? Or maybe the one that was like a genius that like stole like shit from science class. That was in the 60s,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah. He was super smart. And, as he grew up, they did throw around that he was probably on the autism spectrum. But that wasn't until, into the 90s,
Right.
So when he grew up, like in the 50s and 60s, he was, what I think his biggest issue was, and this is Graham Young, the teacup poisoner. And he was from London, and I'm pretty sure that his issue was that he had a attachment disorder with his mother, and so his mother ended up dying. She got tuberculosis when she was pregnant with him, and she ended up passing away when he was like 3 months old. So he went to live with an aunt and uncle who just kind of raised him up until he was 3, and then his dad remarried, so then he went back and was raised by this stepmom who, for whatever reason, he never liked her. And so as he got older and messed around with chemistry, he decided that he wanted to try poisoning people. And she was actually the first person that he killed.
Oh, okay.
Was his stepmom when he was 14.
Wow. But he was like locked away, wasn't he? Like poisoning people when he was locked away and stuff too. He was a problem.
Everywhere he went, he poisoned people. So he committed that murder as a juvenile, but there was no actual proof that he did it. They didn't figure this out until later. Oh, but he did poison his sister, his dad, and his friend from school, but they all survived. So that got him locked up for a couple years. So he got out when he was 21, and he was able to get a job, in a photographic lab where he had access to chemicals, and he just kept right on poisoning people.
Just kept on, keep on keeping on.
Oh, you used to poison people as kids? We got the perfect job for you.
Work with some more chemicals, buddy. We got.
You got to smother him.
Juvenile. He was a juvenile when that happened. So when he got released as an adult, they can't really, tell everyone all of those things. They knew he had been institutionalized for a portion of his teenage years, but they didn't know that it was because the court said so.
It's a doctor-patient confidentiality.
So two of his co-workers get poisoned to death.
Oh man!
Holy fuck! So wait, what you're saying then is that if you did something as a juvenile, they're not allowed to tell anybody what that is? It's just like a hidden secret when you're released.
He was a naughty boy.
Yeah, juvenile records are sealed.
Wow.
Holy shit.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, even here, juvenile records are sealed sometimes. So, I mean, now we have that thing where, of course, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but, journalists and things like that, the public can petition for certain kinds of records and things like that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, juvenile records are sealed.
Wow.
So,
I had no idea. Wow.
But the craziest part is that he went to prison for he was in prison. He got life in prison for killing his coworkers. And after 35 years, he got a day pass for 1 day and killed someone within 1 hour.
Wow! What
he should just be executed at that point. Like, okay, you cannot be redeemed.
We gave you a day and you couldn't even go. You couldn't even go a day.
They fucking slapped people on the wrists, I swear.
But they should just, bullet in the head.
Smothered him. He should have been smothered.
You just want to smother people.
He should have been fucking smothered.
Wow, Slambo.
I mean, if he had gotten life in prison for killing his stepmom, then, all those people would have lived. But that's just not what happened. So,
wow.
Pretty crazy.
Would you ever interview a killer on your show?
Well, what kind of killer? Like, I interviewed a killer last month.
You have?
Wow.
Was that you? Was that?
But to me, he's a killer because he killed someone, but he's not a murderer because it wasn't premeditated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who was the interview with Antonio Espree? Was that you?
Yeah, that was him. Yeah, he was a juvenile lifer. He got juvenile life without parole in the late 80s when he was about 17. And then he did about 30 years before he was released after the Supreme Court decision that juvenile life without parole was unconstitutional. So he did about 30 years. He's only been out for 2 years, and he happens to live here.
Wow.
So I saw an article about him, and then I just was like, hey, do you want to talk? So, yeah, so it was pretty interesting. He had found himself wrapped up in, he had some people in the neighborhood. He had a fairly decent upbringing, but in his teenage years, his mother had issues of her own, and so she wasn't able to take the best care of him. So he had some neighbors who offered, if you need anything, come over. But little did he know they trafficked drugs and guns.
Okay.
Wow.
So at the age of about 15, these are the role models in his life. And before he knows it, when he's 16, he does get caught up in a pretty big shootout. And the gun that he was shooting killed someone.
Is that what it was? Yeah, because I heard him talk about his stepfather being like a drug addict and stuff like that.
So
it was rough.
That guy.
Yeah, I wasn't saying anything. You go.
No, I was gonna say.
Yeah, smother him.
No.
Smother.
No. That guy. So that guy gets like almost life in prison. Yet someone that
He
just
did get life without parole.
Yeah. But someone who just keeps on killing and killing
gets
slapped on the wrist. There's something wrong.
Well, I mean, I know, and it's crazy because, I mean, I guess, many decades separated these two cases,
Yeah.
But it's very true. It just varies by states. I mean, some states will, there were states who would give kids the death penalty. Like one of the serial killers from the United States I'm going to cover next week, he actually got 3 death penalty sentences for crimes that he started committing when he was 17. And he's actually still on death row.
I was going to say, is he still
There's
around?
not tons of juveniles still on death row, but he is still on death row.
Wow. How long has he been?
It's been since the mid-90s. Yeah, he's about the same age as me. And this was when we were 17, so it was about 93, 94. So he's just been filing appeal after appeal. Plus, with the Supreme Court rulings and things, they've had effects on certain areas of certain aspects of some of his cases. But he just had so many charges. He's just been stalled in the justice system for like almost 25 years. So we'll see what happens. But as it stands, he's still on death row in Pennsylvania.
I was going to ask where he was.
Yeah, this was in Allentown, Pennsylvania. He was Allentown, Pennsylvania's first, and I don't know, I'm sure they've had another serial killer by now, but he was their first, and he was 17 years old, so.
How do they do
and
that?
The crazier thing is that his dad also had killed someone. That always creeps me out. I always think that's so crazy when one of my kid killers has a parent who also killed someone.
Wow.
So his dad, like 13... maybe 11 years before he was born, pretty much his dad was married and had 4 kids. And he also had a girlfriend. And one night he beat that girlfriend to death. And he got sentenced to 6 to 12 years. But he got out a little bit early. And then 11 years later had Harvey Robinson, who would end up being a serial killer when he reached his teenage years. So
wow.
The murder gene.
The murder.
Double Y.
Yeah, so I'm going to approach this as nature versus nurture because I just, all of these different kids I talk about just come from all different backgrounds, but they all they end up in the same place. So it'll be interesting to see, the contrast. But the other guy is Craig Price. He was a serial killer that started at the age of 13 in Rhode Island. He killed one person when he was 13 and 3 people. A mother and her 2 daughters when he was 15. So since he was a juvenile, they could only hold him until he was 21. And this was in the late 80s. So he was supposed to get out pretty much, they could only hold until he was 21. So that was in 1991. So they've been trying in Rhode Island since 1991 to keep him in jail because they think he's so dangerous. They ended up moving him to Florida, but they literally charge him with whatever they can find and then throw the book at him. So he was just approaching release earlier this year, and then he had a pending charge for stabbing an inmate with like a homemade shiv, and they just sentenced him to 25 to life for that. So now I feel I'm safe to talk about him.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for that, because if there was any chance he was getting out, I wasn't going to say a word. I'll wait on that. So
Saving that guy. Well, have you ever done the story that you told us about last time, the one that freaked you out the most?
oh, you're gonna have to refresh my
I
memory.
think he was a student. I think you told us he did.
Was
he,
it the
Oh,
student
yeah,
that like?
I did it.
Oh,
did
okay,
it?
cool.
Didn't he put people in like
Trash? Didn't he
I
take
was
some
thinking, like,
teacher in a trash can or
mail
something?
bins or something?
Oh, okay.
Was it that or?
No, he did. He put his he killed his math teacher, and he wheeled her body out of the school
That's
in the
what it was.
recycle bin.
Yes. Yes.
Holy
Yeah,
shit.
that was tough.
Mm.
That one was really tough.
Wow.
Yeah, I did that a couple months ago. I would say probably around the World Series time, because I had come across a tweet that the Red Sox had tweeted about this teacher. It was literally like the day before they were going to begin the World Series, and they were in it. And then I just did the story, and they were in it again. Wow. And it was exactly when I was releasing the story, so it was very weird. I posted the tweet that they had made 5 years before, but they were in the World Series again this year. So
What was the tweet?
So I know it was around October.
What did they tweet about the teacher?
They just tweeted that they had a moment of silence for her when she was first murdered 5 years ago on Game 1 of the World Series. And then when I posted this episode about her, it had just happened to have been 5 years, and they were in the World Series again for the first time since then. So, yeah, they had tweeted, they had shown her picture and tweeted a moment of silence for her, because where she was killed was pretty close to Boston. So it was right outside Salem, Massachusetts.
Wow.
So, yeah, pretty tragic. But, let me tell you about the series I have coming up, because you guys won't even believe it. Because it's called When Toddlers Kill.
Well, I was gonna ask, what's the youngest? I was like an 18-month-old. Can a toddler even do that?
Wow, how does that work?
Poke your eyeball?
Well, I mean, if you leave a gun laying around, a toddler can shoot you.
That's
If you were
your
ever
fault,
wondering
though.
about that.
Yeah, no. That ain't that baby's
Their hands-
fault.
They don't get it.
Yeah, their hands are big enough, and apparently they have enough strength in their hands to shoot you. So just keep that in mind.
So like, in my opinion, like, the 8-year-old who murders somebody, it's like, okay, I might hold that against you for the rest of your life. But the toddler that does it by
toddler is
accident,
just
it's like, you're not even going to remember
That
that.
toddler's adorable.
Oh, and these
Usually
are the-
happens
some of the
trailer
worst
parks.
stories that I've ever come across. And I'm not even a gun control advocate.
Yeah.
I know that there is no way people are ever going to collect everyone's guns. But if you have guns, you should certainly try to keep them at a
So
distance.
is it all the toddler getting a hold of a gun?
Put him in the case for the toddlers.
Yes. I haven't come across any other instances.
I didn't
of
know if it was
toddlers
something
killing.
crazy like,
That-
oh, the toddler was playing with like some marbles and
That
they dropped the
toddler
marbles and
was-
somebody tripped on the marbles and died.
Or-
Possessed by the
or
devil.
a snowmobile, or a trampoline. There's all kinds of ways.
Come
but
on.
I haven't come across any other ones yet.
I was drunk. I let the toddler drive. I shouldn't have, but I thought it was better than being drunk behind the wheel.
That's a good note to end
Yeah,
on.
so like I always say, don't trust them. Don't trust any of those kids.
Never.
Keep both eyes on them at all times.
War Baby, we have to wrap it up, but it's been great talking to you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Let Driz know that Theodora Bear loves her song.
I was going to ask if like you were going to bring that to a courtroom at some point.
Yeah, she thought it was great. She wanted me to let her know.
She's the only one.
Well, it was about her, so of course she had to like it.
Oh, that's amazing. Where can everybody find you, War Baby?
You can find me on Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram at Killer Kids Pod. You can find me on Facebook at Murderous Minors Killer Kids, and my podcast is Murderous Minors Killer Kids. I'm on iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Check it out.
Awesome. Would you let Driz do your new opening? Like, would he be able to rap for you for your opening?
Well, I'd have to hear it first, but of course, I'm always accepting music.
Yeah, I'll be down. I
Except
already.
If you're a Twitter musician, yeah, don't send me music.
I already got like the first line.
He's
The
a
first line
twiddler.
is gonna be like, yeah, you're listening to this podcast, and it's about like kids and they're gonna kill people. Yeah, like something like that. Yeah.
And that's exactly what I would expect.
Just like a genius,
I
like
can't
that.
wait
Yeah.
to hear
That's
it.
good stuff.
I think that's all. I think you heard all of it right now. I think that's all he got, more baby. We'll talk to you soon,
Thanks,
more
guys.
baby. Thank you.
Hi, Ryder.
All right, we'll see you guys
Ryder
next
loves
week.
her.